Hey guys, before the video starts, I want to say that I added a join button where you can become member of Mr. Prodanov's family. And also, to all those who are new, feel free to subscribe. It can help a lot. I found a dark web forum that predicts celebrity deaths. Hey Reddit, I'm here to share something that's been eating at me for weeks. I need to get it off my chest because I feel like I'm losing my mind. This all started a couple of months ago when I was exploring the dark web out of sheer boredom. I know, it was a stupid thing to do, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I was poking around various forums and marketplaces when I stumbled across this one forum. It was buried deep, far from the usual haunts you'd find on the dark web. The name was something cryptic, like Mortem Predictorum. The tagline caught my eye. We see the future, one celebrity at a time. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked in. The layout was basic, just a black background with white text, but it felt sinister. The posts were all predictions of celebrity deaths. People were discussing the details of how and when celebrities would die with eerie accuracy. There were threads about old deaths that had come true, and new ones that were predicted to happen soon. The most recent thread was about a famous actor, someone everyone knows and loves. The post was from a user named Oracle9, and it detailed exactly how this actor would die in a car crash. The level of detail was disturbing. The exact make and model of the car, the location, even the weather conditions. It was so specific that it made my skin crawl. I didn't believe it at first. I mean, it had to be some kind of sick joke, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. I started following the forum obsessively, checking back every day. About a week later, the news broke. That actor had died in a car crash, just as the post had described. Same car, same place, same weather. Everything. My blood ran cold. This was beyond coincidence. I started digging deeper into the forum, reading every post I could find. The predictions went back years, and every single one had come true. Musicians, actors, politicians. If it was a big name, they had it covered. And each prediction was posted just days or weeks before the event happened. I decided to make an account and join the discussion. I needed to know how they were doing this. I posted a comment on one of the threads asking how they were getting their information. Within minutes, I got a private message from Oracle9. Stop asking questions you don't want answers to, it read. I should have listened, but I was in too deep. I replied, asking again how they knew these things. Oracle9's response chilled me to the bone. We don't predict, we control. I didn't understand what they meant by that, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I was constantly refreshing the forum, waiting for the next prediction. Then it came. The post was about a beloved singer, someone who had been in the industry for decades. The details were grotesque. They would die from a massive overdose, alone in their hotel room. The date was set for the following week. I felt sick. I wanted to warn them, but how could I explain how I knew? No one would believe me. And even if they did, what good would it do? These people were claiming to control these deaths, not just predict them. The week dragged on, and I was a wreck. The day of the predicted death, I sat glued to the news. Hours passed, and nothing happened. I started to think maybe it was all a hoax after all. But then, just as I was about to shut off the TV, the breaking news came in. The singer had been found dead in their hotel room. Overdose. I was losing it. I couldn't handle the guilt, the fear. I decided to delete my account and never look at that forum again. But before I could, Oracle 9 sent me another message. Now you know. Stay away, or you're next. I haven't gone back to the dark web since, but every time I see a celebrity on the news, I can't help but wonder if their time has already been decided, if they're just ticking down the days until their name appears on Mortem Predictorum. I don't know who these people are or how they're doing it, but I pray no one else falls into their trap. Be careful where your curiosity takes you, Reddit. Some things are better left unknown. Alright, Reddit, here's the next part of my story. It's been a few months since I last posted about Mortem Predictorum, but the nightmares haven't stopped. In fact, they've gotten worse. I thought cutting ties with the forum would help, but it's like something dark has latched onto me and won't let go. After that last message from Oracle 9, I tried to move on with my life. But every time a celebrity died, I couldn't help but check the news and compare it to the forum. Each death matched a prediction I had read before I left. It was driving me insane. The guilt and fear were eating me alive. I felt like I needed to do something, anything, to stop this madness. One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, where I saw Oracle 9's predictions scrolling in front of my eyes like some hellish teleprompter, I snapped. I decided to dive back into the dark web, but this time with a plan. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let Oracle 9 scare me away again. I created a new, more secure account and rejoined the forum under a different name. The layout was the same, but the posts seemed even more sinister than before. It felt like there was an unspoken rule that you didn't question anything. You just watched as the macabre predictions unfolded. I started messaging other users, trying to get a feel for how deep this thing went. Most ignored me, but a few replied with cryptic warnings similar to Oracle 9's. They told me to stop asking questions, to just let things be, but I couldn't. Then I got a message from a user named Seer13. Unlike the others, they seemed willing to talk. Meet me on the private chat, they said. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed, and we moved to a more secure chat room. What do you want to know? Seer13 asked. Everything, I replied. How do you predict these deaths? Who is Oracle 9? There was a long pause before Seer13 responded. We don't predict them. We make them happen. I felt a chill run down my spine. How? Why? It's complicated, Seer13 said. We have connections, influence. Some of us are in positions of power. Others have abilities you wouldn't believe. As for why, let's just say it's a mix of control and chaos. Some do it for the thrill. Others for money or power. This was getting more disturbing by the second. And Oracle 9? Oracle 9 is one of the original members. Let's just say they have more direct methods of ensuring predictions come true. I felt sick. This wasn't just some twisted game. Those people were orchestrating deaths for their own gain. I had to do something. But what? Who could I tell that would believe me? Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want out, Seer13 admitted. I've seen too much. I'm scared, but I don't know how to leave without them coming after me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to help, but another part was terrified. What if getting involved put me in their crosshairs? Do you know who their next target is? I asked. hoping I could at least save one person. Yes, Sia 13 replied, but it won't matter. They'll make sure it happens one way or another. Tell me anyway, I insisted. Sia 13 hesitated and finally typed out a name. It was a well-known politician, someone who had been in the news a lot lately. They planned to make it look like a heart attack, Sia 13 explained. In 2 weeks. I knew I had to act, but I was at a loss for what to do. I thanked Sia 13 and logged off, my mind racing. I couldn't go to the police with this. I'd sound like a lunatic. But I couldn't just do nothing. I decided to contact the politician directly. It was a long shot, but I managed to find an email address for their public relations team. I sent a message explaining the situation as best I could without sounding completely insane. Days passed without a response, and I began to lose hope. In just a few days, before the predicted death, I got a reply. It was from one of the politician's aides dismissing my email as a prank. They said they'd forward it to security, but I knew they didn't take me seriously. I felt helpless. On the day of the prediction, I stayed glued to the news again. Hours passed with no reports, and I started to think maybe my warning had somehow worked. But then, just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the news broke. The politician had collapsed during a speech and was rushed to the hospital. They didn't make it. Heart attack, just as Sia 13 had said. I was devastated. My attempt to stop it had failed, and now I was more involved than ever. Oracle 9's words echoed in my mind. Stay away, or you're next. I knew I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to find a way to stop these monsters, even if it meant putting my own life at risk. Be careful what you dig into, Reddit. Some secrets are deadly. Hey Reddit, it's me again. This will be my final post. Things have escalated in ways I never could have imagined, and I don't know if I'll make it through this, but I need to tell you what happened. Maybe it'll serve as a warning, or maybe it'll help someone else avoid the mistakes I made. After the politician's death, I knew I had to take more drastic measures. I couldn't let these people continue their twisted game. I reached out to Sia 13 again, desperate for more information. They were hesitant at first, but eventually they agreed to meet in person. We chose a nondescript diner in the middle of nowhere. I was paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder, but I needed answers. Sia 13 turned out to be a woman in her late 30s, looking as haggard and paranoid as I felt. She told me more about the inner workings of Mortem Predictorum. It wasn't just a forum. It was a network of powerful individuals who thrived on chaos and control. They had ties to organized crime, corrupt officials, and even some tech moguls. It was a vast web of influence, and Oracle 9 was at the center. I asked Sia 13 why she was still involved if she wanted out so badly. She confessed that she was trapped. They had dirt on her, things that would ruin her life if they ever got out. She had tried to leave before, but the threats were too severe. She was scared for her life, and now, by talking to me, she was risking everything. I felt a pang of guilt. I had dragged this woman deeper into the abyss, and now we were both in danger. But we couldn't stop. We decided to work together to expose the forum. We gathered as much information as we could, screenshots, message logs, anything that could serve as evidence. It was risky, but we were determined. Our plan was to leak everything to the media and the authorities simultaneously. We hoped that the sheer volume of evidence would force them to take action. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. As we prepared, I received another message from Oracle 9. You've crossed the line. Consider this your final warning. My blood ran cold. They knew. I showed the message to Seer 13, and she paled. We both knew we were out of time. We had to act fast. We set a date for the leak, and worked tirelessly to compile everything we had. The night before the leak, I heard strange noises outside my apartment. Footsteps, low murmurs, the sound of something metallic scraping against the walls. My heart pounded in my chest as I peeked through the blinds. 2 figures stood outside, their faces obscured by hoods. They were watching me. I knew I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my laptop, the hard drives with all our evidence, and fled. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, constantly checking my rearview mirror. Every car that followed me made my heart skip a beat. I checked in under a fake name and barricaded myself in the room. I called Seer 13 to warn her, but there was no answer. Panic set in. Had they already gotten to her? I didn't know what to do. I spent the night in that dingy motel room, jumping at every sound, every creak of the floorboards. I barely slept, my mind racing with fear and paranoia. The next morning, I logged into the forum one last time. There was a new post from Oracle 9. It was titled, "The Next Prediction." My stomach churned as I clicked on it. The post detailed a death, but this time, it wasn't a celebrity. It was me. They described in gruesome detail how I would be found in my motel room, a victim of an apparent suicide. They even included the name of the motel and my fake check-in name. I felt the walls closing in on me. They were already here. My phone buzzed, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a message from Seer 13. "They're here. Get out, now." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my things and bolted from the room. As I ran to my car, I saw the hooded figures from the night before rounding the corner. I sped out of the parking lot, my hands shaking on the wheel. I drove aimlessly, not knowing where to go. I couldn't go home, couldn't trust anyone. I was completely alone. I pulled over at a rest stop to catch my breath and figure out my next move. That's when I noticed a van pull in behind me. It was the same one I had seen outside my apartment. I didn't have time to think. I floored the gas pedal and tore out of there. I drove for hours, crossing state lines, trying to lose them. My gas tank was nearly empty when I finally stopped at another motel. I checked in, this time using cash and a different fake name. I spent the night sending everything we had to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency I could think of. I didn't know if it would be enough, but it was all I could do. Then I destroyed my laptop and phone, hoping to cover my tracks. Now, I'm writing this from a borrowed laptop at a public library. I don't know how much longer I have, but I needed to get this out there. If you're reading this, know that mortem predictorum is real, and they're more dangerous than you can imagine. They control life and death, and if they want you gone, they'll make it happen. Stay safe, Reddit. Trust no one. And if you ever stumble across a forum predicting celebrity deaths, run. Run, and don't look back. This is my final warning. Goodbye. My dark web job led me to a hidden underground city. Alright, so this is going to be the weirdest and most messed up thing I've ever written, but I need to get it off my chest. I got a job off the dark web, and it led me to discovering an underground city. Trust me, it's not what you think. and it's a lot worse. I've always been into the tech scene, hacking, coding, all that stuff. But I was broke, and I needed money fast. A buddy of mine told me about a gig he found on the dark web. The pay was insane, so I figured, why not? Worst case, I bail if it gets sketchy. So I dive into the dark web, poking around until I find this job posting. It was vague, just said they needed someone good with tech for a special project. The money was too good to pass up. I clicked on it and sent in my info. A few days later, I got an email. It was weird. No name, just an address and a time. The instructions were clear. Come alone. Bring no electronics except a burner phone. Already sketchy, but curiosity got the best of me. The address led me to a run-down part of town, where every building looked abandoned. There was this old graffiti-covered warehouse. I stood there for a minute, considering if I should just turn around and leave. But again, that money was too tempting. I knocked on the door, and this huge guy let me in. He didn't say anything, just motioned for me to follow. Inside, it was pitch black. He handed me a blindfold. That should have been my cue to leave, but I didn't. Instead, I put it on and followed him, trusting my footsteps to keep me steady. We walked for what felt like hours. I tried to count my steps, but I lost track. Finally, we stopped, and he took off my blindfold. We were in a room with just a table and 2 chairs. A man in a suit sat across from me, his face hidden in shadows. "We need you to manage some systems for us," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You'll be handling sensitive information. Are you in?" I nodded. Before I could ask any questions, he handed me a laptop and some documents. The job seemed simple enough. Monitor data, keep things running smoothly, and report any anomalies. I should have known it wasn't that straightforward. For the first few days, everything was normal. The pay was great, and I was handling their data, which seemed to be a bunch of random transactions. But then things got weird. I started noticing patterns, weird messages hidden in the data. Phrases like, "help me," and "they're watching," kept popping up. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was frantic. "Get out while you can. They're not what they seem. They know you're looking." Before I could ask who it was, the line went dead. I tried to brush it off, but my paranoia was growing. I started digging deeper into the data, and what I found was horrifying. There were videos, hidden in encrypted files. I should have stopped, but I couldn't. I had to know. The first video was grainy, like it was shot on an old camcorder. It showed a group of people in some kind of underground facility. They were chained to the walls, screaming, and there were others, people in lab coats, performing experiments on them. The screams were deafening. I couldn't look away. There were more videos, each one worse than the last. People being tortured, experimented on, mutilated. I realized this wasn't just a tech job. I was helping these monsters. I tried to quit, but they wouldn't let me. They knew where I lived, where my family lived. They made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, bad things would happen. So I kept working, all the while trying to find a way out. One night, I got another call. It was the same voice, but calmer this time. "If you want to escape, follow my instructions. There's a way out, but you have to trust me." Desperation drove me to follow the voice's instructions. They led me to a tunnel beneath the city, one that wasn't on any map. The further I went, the colder it got. The walls were damp, and the air reeked of decay. After what felt like miles of walking, I found a door. It was heavy, made of steel, and covered in rust. I pushed it open, and what I saw on the other side was something straight out of a nightmare. There was a whole city down there, hidden beneath the surface. Buildings made of stone and metal, illuminated by a sickly green light that seemed to come from nowhere. The streets were filled with people, or what used to be people. They were twisted, mutated, their faces contorted in agony. Some were missing limbs, others had extra ones, and they all looked at me with eyes full of despair. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see the man from the videos, the one who had called me. "Welcome," he said, and his voice hollow. "This is where they keep us. This is what you've been helping with." That's when it hit me. The data I was managing, the transactions, it was all to fund this place, to keep these experiments going. I had been a pawn in their sick game. The man handed me a flash drive. "Take this, expose them. It's the only way to end this." I took the drive and ran, not stopping until I was out of the tunnel and back on the streets above. I didn't go home. I knew they'd be watching. Instead, I found a public library, plugged in the drive, and started uploading everything to every dark web forum I could find. I don't know if it was enough. I don't know if they found me. All I know is that I can't sleep, can't eat. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. I hear their screams. If you're reading this, be careful. Stay away from the dark web, from jobs that seem too good to be true. Because sometimes the price you pay is your sanity, and you might find yourself in a nightmare you can't wake up from. I haven't slept in days. The faces of those people, those experiments, are burned into my mind. I try to go back to my normal life, but it's impossible. They're everywhere. I see them in my nightmares, in reflections, in every shadow that moves. After uploading the data, I ditched the library and found a cheap motel on the outskirts of the town. I needed to lay low. Every creak and groan of the building made me jump. I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. One night, while I was staring at the cracked ceiling, my burner phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you can hide? We're coming." My heart raced. I bolted the door and shoved a chair under the handle, but I knew it was useless. They'd find me. Desperation makes you do crazy things. I decided to go back to the warehouse to confront whoever was behind this. Maybe I could reason with them, beg them to let me go. I packed my stuff and left the motel, sticking to the shadows. When I got to the warehouse, it was different. The huge guy wasn't there. The door was ajar, creaking in the wind. I slipped inside, moving as quietly as possible. The place was dark, just like before, but now it felt empty. I made my way to the room where I had first met the man in the suit. It was empty too, except for a single piece of paper on the table. I picked it up and read, "You're in too deep. Meet me at the old factory on the edge of town, midnight." I didn't have any other choice. If this was my only shot at ending this, I had to take it. I left the warehouse and headed to the factory. It was a massive, decaying building, a relic from a time long forgotten. The place gave off an aura of dread, like it was alive and breathing. Midnight came, and I stood there, waiting. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the moon cast eerie shadows across the ground. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around to see the man from the videos, the one who had helped me. "You came," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Good. There's something you need to see." He led me inside, through a maze of rusted machinery and crumbling walls. The deeper we went, the colder it got. My breath came out in white puffs, and my fingers went numb. Finally, we reached a heavy metal door, similar to the one I had found in the tunnel. "Through here," he said, pushing it open. What lay beyond was worse than anything I had seen before. It was another underground facility, but this one was different. The walls were lined with cages, and inside each one was a person. They were in various states of disfigurement, some missing limbs, others with grotesque growths sprouting from their bodies. Their eyes were hollow, their spirits broken. "They did this to us," the man said, his voice shaking. "They're trying to create something, some kind of perfect being, but it's all gone wrong." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. These people, they're not human. They're monsters, and they won't stop until they've perfected their experiments." I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. "How do we stop them?" The man handed me another flash drive. "This has everything, every experiment, every failure. Take it to the media, to anyone who will listen. Expose them." Before I could respond, the door behind us slammed shut. We were plunged into darkness. I heard the man scream, then silence. I fumbled for my phone, using the screen to light my way. The man was gone, and I was alone. Panic set in. I ran through the facility, trying to find a way out. The corridors twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the labyrinth. I could hear voices, whispers in the dark, telling me to give up, to accept my fate. After what felt like hours, I found a stairwell leading up. I took the steps 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my chest. When I burst through the door at the top, I was back in the factory. I didn't stop running until I was miles away. I found another motel and locked myself in. I pulled out the flash drive and plugged it into my laptop. The files were even worse than the first ones. Detailed reports of the experiments, video footage of the procedures, and notes from the scientists. They were trying to create something called Project Eden, some kind of perfect human being, but every attempt had failed, leaving behind a trail of mutilated bodies. I sent the files to every news outlet I could think of, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. These people had power, influence. They could make this disappear. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm exhausted, terrified. I can't trust anyone. If you're reading this, stay away from the dark web, from jobs that seem too good to be true. Because once you're in, there's no way out. And the things you'll see, you'll never forget them. I thought exposing them would be the end, that once the truth was out, I'd be safe. But I was wrong. The files I sent out disappeared without a trace. The news outlets ignored me, or maybe they were silenced, and I started getting more messages. You can't run. You can't hide. Paranoia consumed me. Every shadow, every flicker of movement made me jump. I barely slept, afraid they would find me. And they did. One night, there was a knock on my motel door. I peeked through the peephole and saw a familiar face, the huge guy from the warehouse. My heart stopped. I grabbed my things and climbed out the window, fleeing into the night. I couldn't keep running. I needed to end this once and for all. I remembered something the man in the factory had said about a central hub, a place where all their operations were controlled. If I could find it, maybe I could shut them down. I spent days searching for any clue, any lead. Then I found it. An abandoned mansion on the outskirts of the town. Rumors swirled around it, stories of strange noises and mysterious disappearances. It fit the profile. Getting inside was easier than I expected. The front door creaked open, revealing a grand foyer covered in dust and cobwebs. I moved cautiously, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The place was massive, with corridors branching off in every direction. I followed my instincts, heading deeper into the mansion. After what felt like hours, I found a hidden staircase leading down. The air grew colder with each step, the stench of decay growing stronger. At the bottom, I came to another heavy metal door. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The sight that greeted me was beyond horrifying. Rows of operating tables filled the room, each one occupied by a person in various stages of mutilation. Some were unconscious, others writhed in pain. The walls were lined with monitors displaying vitals, data, and the twisted experiments being conducted. In the center of the room stood a man in a lab coat. He looked up as I entered, a cold smile spreading across his face. "I see you've made it this far. Impressive." I clenched my fists. "This ends now." He laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the room. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Project Eden is almost complete. Soon the world will see our creation." I lunged at him, but he was faster. He pressed a button on the remote, and the operating tables began to rise, revealing a network of tunnels beneath them. From the darkness emerged creatures, twisted, grotesque beings, results of their failed experiments. They moved towards me, eyes filled with malice. I fought with everything I had, using whatever I could find as a weapon. But they kept coming. Just when I thought it was over, I remembered the flash drive. I pulled it out and jammed it into one of the control panels, hoping it would do something. Anything. The monitors flickered, and the creatures paused, confused. The man in the lab coat screamed in rage. "What have you done?" The system began to overload, sparks flying from the panels. The creatures turned on him, tearing him apart as the room descended into chaos. I ran, dodging debris and fallen bodies, desperate to escape. I made it back to the main floor, but the mansion was collapsing around me. I burst through the front door just as the entire structure caved in. I didn't stop running until I was far away, the smoke and dust a distant memory. In the aftermath, I went to the authorities, but they didn't believe me. The mansion's remains were cleared, the evidence gone, but I knew what I saw, and I had the flash drive as proof. Weeks passed, and the nightmares persisted. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Then one day, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just a plain envelope with a USB stick inside. I plugged it into my laptop, and a video began to play. It was a message from the man in the lab coat. "You may have disrupted our operations, but Project Eden is far from over. We will rise again, and when we do, there will be no place for you to hide." The video ended, and I sat there, numb. They were still out there, still experimenting, still creating, and they wouldn't stop until their vision was realized. I'm writing this as a warning. If you find yourself on the dark web, tempted by easy money, turn back. Don't get involved, because once you're in, there's no escape. They will find you, and they will drag you into their nightmare. This is my final message. I'm going off the grid, disappearing completely. Maybe then I'll be safe. But if you're reading this, remember, they're always watching, and they're always waiting for their next victim. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay away from the dark web. The end I found a dark web video game that predicts the future. I've always been a sucker for the weird and the unusual. Late night horror movies, creepy Reddit threads, and, most recently, exploring the dark web. Yeah, I know, it's a stupid thing to do, but curiosity got the better of me. And that's how I stumbled upon something that changed my life forever. It started about 2 months ago. I was browsing through some forums looking for something to entertain myself with. Most of it was the usual dark web crap. Illegal drugs, fake IDs, hitmen for hire. But then I found a thread titled Dark Web Games Dare to Play. The post had a link, no description, no comments. Just a link. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. But then I clicked it. The link took me to a black screen with a single line of text. Welcome to the game of fate. Below it was a download button. I clicked download, and a zip file named fategame.zip appeared on my desktop. I unzipped it, revealing an executable file. Against my better judgment, I double-clicked it. The game started with an eerie, low-frequency hum. The title screen was simple. Just the words, Game of Fate, in a blood-red font, on a black background. The game itself looked like an old-school text adventure. A simple prompt appeared. Enter your name. I typed in my real name, which in hindsight was a stupid idea. Immediately, the game started spitting out details about my life, my address, my family members, my job. It was unsettling, but I told myself it was just some clever use of publicly available information. The next prompt asked for my deepest fear. I thought for a moment and typed, losing my sister. My sister Lisa was my best friend. We'd been through everything together. The game seemed to pause, almost like it was thinking, and then it displayed a single word. Noted. The screen went black for a few seconds before a new message appeared. Predicting your future. I felt a chill run down my spine as the screen filled with text. It described a scenario where Lisa and I would go hiking, something we did often, but this time, the game said, we would encounter a man in the woods and he would kill her while I watched, helpless. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself it was just a game, but it felt too real. I closed the game and tried to forget about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. A week later, Lisa suggested we go hiking. I immediately thought of the game and hesitated, but I didn't want to let some stupid text adventure control my life. So we went. The hike started off like any other. We laughed, talked about our lives, and enjoyed the fresh air. But as we got deeper into the woods, I started to feel uneasy. Every rustle in the bushes made my heart race. And then we saw him. A man, just like the game had predicted. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and dead eyes. He approached us, and I could see the glint of a knife in his hand. Time seemed to slow down. I tried to scream, to run, to do anything, but I was frozen. The man grabbed Lisa, and in a flash, the knife was in her chest. Blood poured from the wound, and she fell to the ground, gasping for breath. I finally found my voice and screamed, but it was too late. The man turned and ran, leaving me with my dying sister. I held her in my arms, crying and begging her to stay with me, but she was gone within minutes. I was in shock, my mind racing back to the game. How could it have known? How was any of this possible? I spent the next few days in a daze, barely able to function. I didn't tell anyone about the game, fearing they'd think I was crazy, but I knew I had to find out more. I had to understand what had happened. I reopened the game, my hands trembling. The title screen greeted me again. and this time the prompt said, "Welcome back, my name. Ready for your next prediction?" I typed yes, driven by a morbid curiosity and a need for answers. The screen went black again, and a new message appeared, predicting your future. What it revealed this time was even more horrifying. The game predicted that I would be accused of Lisa's murder. It laid out everything: the evidence, the trial, the verdict. According to the game, I was going to be found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding. This was insane. There was no way this could happen. But as the days passed, things started to unfold just like the game had predicted. The police found my fingerprints on Lisa's body, the knife, and the blood-soaked ground where she had died. I tried to explain what had really happened, but no one believed me. It's been 2 months since Lisa's death, and I'm writing this from a prison cell. I was found guilty of her murder last week. My lawyer is working on an appeal, but it's a long shot. No one believes my story about the game. I keep replaying everything in my mind, trying to figure out if there was something I missed, some clue that could explain all this. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that the game wasn't just predicting the future, it was controlling it. And now, sitting here in this cell, I can't help but wonder what the game will predict next. I spent my first night in prison wide awake, the cold, hard bed doing nothing to ease my racing thoughts. All I could think about was that cursed game. How could it predict everything so perfectly? Was it some kind of twisted joke, or was there something more sinister at play? Days turned into weeks, and I settled into the bleak routine of prison life. My appeal was progressing slowly, and I had nothing but time to think. Every night, I replayed the events in my mind, wondering if I could have done something differently to save Lisa. One day, during my allotted hour in the prison library, I stumbled upon an old, dusty computer in the corner. It was ancient, a relic from the early 2000s, but it was connected to the internet. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to see if I could find anything about the game of fate. I spent hours searching, diving deep into the darkest corners of the web. Finally, I found a forum dedicated to dark web mysteries. There was a single thread about the game, buried under years of inactivity. Most of the posts were vague, people speculating about its origins and purpose. But one post stood out. It was from a user named Shadow Seeker, and it was dated just a few days before I found the game. Shadow Seeker claimed to have created the game. They said it was designed as a social experiment to see how people would react when faced with their own mortality. But the post took a dark turn. Shadow Seeker admitted that the game had taken on a life of its own, predicting events with eerie accuracy, and even causing them to happen. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the final lines of the post. If you're reading this, it's too late. The game has chosen you. It will continue to predict your future, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Good luck. I logged off the computer, my mind racing. Was it possible that the game was some kind of malevolent entity controlling the fate of those who played it? I didn't have time to ponder that question. That night, during a rare moment of solitude in my cell, I heard a familiar hum. My blood ran cold as I looked around and saw the faint glow of my laptop screen. The guards had confiscated all my belongings, including my laptop. There was no way it could be here. But there it was, sitting on the small metal table in my cell. The game of fate, open and waiting. My hands trembled as I approached it. The screen displayed a single word: Continue? I hesitated, every fiber of my being screaming at me to walk away, but I needed answers. I clicked yes. The screen went black for a moment, then a new message appeared. Predicting your future. This time, the game's prediction was immediate. It showed me a detailed account of the next few weeks of my life. It said that I would receive a visit from a stranger, someone who claimed to believe my story. This person would help me escape from prison, but the escape would end in tragedy. I would die in the attempt, and my death would be ruled a suicide. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But then, just as the game had predicted, a few days later, I received a visit. The man introduced himself as David. He was tall, with a calm demeanor and a piercing gaze. He said he'd read about my case and believed I was innocent. More importantly, he believed my story about the game. He told me he had connections, people who could help us. He had a plan to get me out. Desperation and the need for answers overrode my better judgment. I agreed to the plan. Over the next few days, David smuggled in tools and detailed instructions. On the night of the escape, everything went according to plan at first. We made it past the guards, through the security checkpoints, and out into the cold night air. But as we reached the perimeter fence, something went wrong. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and guards swarmed us. David and I ran, but there was nowhere to go. In the chaos, I saw David pull a gun from his jacket. He aimed it at the guards, and then at me. My mind raced back to the game's prediction. I closed my eyes, expecting the worst, but instead of a gunshot, I heard a scream. I opened my eyes to see David on the ground, clutching his leg. He'd been shot by one of the guards. In the confusion, I managed to grab the gun and point it at my own head. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I thought it was the only way to end the game's control over my life. But before I could pull the trigger, I felt a sharp pain in my back. Another shot, this time hitting me square in the spine. I collapsed, the world going dark around me. When I woke up, I was back in my cell, my body aching from the gunshot wound. The guards told me I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt trapped, not just in this prison, but in a fate I couldn't escape. The laptop was gone, but I knew it wasn't over. The game had predicted my escape and my death, but I had survived. I had defied its prediction, but at what cost? I'm writing this now, hoping someone will read it and understand. The game of fate is real, and it's out there, waiting for its next victim. If you ever come across it, don't play it. Don't let it control your life like it did mine. A few weeks after the escape attempt, I received a letter. The guards handed it to me with a look of suspicion. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but my heart raced as I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short message. I can help you. Meet me at the old chapel. Shadow Seeker. The old chapel was part of the prison grounds, long abandoned and rarely visited. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Shadow Seeker, the supposed creator of the game, was reaching out to me. I had to find a way to get to that chapel. It took some convincing, but I managed to persuade one of the more sympathetic guards to wheel me to the chapel for spiritual reflection. He looked at me skeptically, but eventually agreed. As we approached the decrepit building, I felt a chill run down my spine. The place reeked of decay and abandonment. The guard left me at the entrance, promising to return in an hour. I willed myself inside, the eerie silence enveloping me. The dim light filtering through the stained glass windows cast ghostly shadows on the walls. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" A figure emerged from the darkness. It was a man, middle-aged, with unkempt hair, and a wild look in his eyes. "You must be my name," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm Shadowseeker." "How do you know about the game?" I demanded. "Why did you create it?" He sighed, taking a seat on a broken pew. "I didn't create it. I discovered it, just like you. It was a relic, a cursed artifact from an old occult society. I thought I could control it, use it to my advantage, but I was wrong. It has a mind of its own. Then why did you bring it to the dark web? Why did you let it ruin people's lives?" I could feel my anger rising, but I was desperate for answers. Shadowseeker looked down, guilt etched on his face. "I thought I could contain it, keep it from spreading, but the game is relentless. Once it latches onto someone, it won't let go until it fulfills its purpose." "And what is its purpose?" I asked, my voice trembling. "To feed on fear and despair," he replied. "It predicts the future, to create the worst possible outcomes, to drive its victims to the brink of madness. The more you fight it, the stronger it becomes." I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. "Is there any way to stop it?" Shadowseeker leaned closer, his eyes intense. "There is one way, but it's risky. You have to confront the game head-on, force it to reveal its secrets. But be warned, it will try to break you." I nodded, determination flooding my veins. "I'll do whatever it takes. I can't let it win." Shadowseeker handed me a small, ancient-looking book. "This contains the ritual. Follow it precisely, and you might have a chance." That night, back in my cell, I opened the book. The pages were filled with strange symbols and cryptic instructions. I gathered the few items I needed, some candles, a piece of chalk, and my sheer will to survive. As the clock struck midnight, I drew the symbols on the floor, lit the candles, and began the ritual. The air grew cold, and a sense of dread filled the room. Suddenly, the laptop reappeared, glowing with an unnatural light. The game opened on its own, displaying a single message: "Final challenge. Face your fate." The screen went black. Then a video started playing. It was footage of my childhood, moments with Lisa, happy times now tainted by grief. The video shifted to the night she died, replaying her murder in gruesome detail. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I couldn't look away. The game then showed my supposed future. My appeal would fail. I'd spend the rest of my life in prison, tormented by the game, until I eventually took my own life. "No," I whispered. "This isn't my fate." The laptop screen flickered, and a new prompt appeared. "Change your fate. Sacrifice required." I hesitated, then typed, "What sacrifice?" The response was immediate. "Someone you love must take your place." My heart sank. The game was demanding another life in exchange for my freedom. I thought of my parents, my friends. Who could I possibly condemn to this horror? Then it hit me. Shadowseeker. He had unleashed this nightmare. He deserved to face the consequences. I typed his name into the game, my hands shaking. The screen flashed and the laptop vanished. I felt a strange sensation, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The symbols on the floor glowed briefly, then faded. The ritual was complete. The next day, the guards informed me that Shadowseeker had been found dead in the chapel, a look of sheer terror on his face. They chalked it up to a heart attack, but I knew the truth. The game had taken him instead. My appeal, miraculously, was successful. New evidence surfaced, proving my innocence. I was released, but the experience had changed me forever. I couldn't escape the memories, the trauma of Lisa's death, and the game's twisted predictions. Even now, as I write this from the safety of my home, I can't shake the feeling that the game isn't done with me. I hear the low hum sometimes, in the dead of night, and I know it's still out there, waiting for its next victim. If you ever find yourself tempted to explore the dark web, remember my story. The game of fate is real, and it's waiting. Don't let it choose you.